Okay, good. So we're live with Ryan Heavyhead.
Awesome.
So we've actually talked about doing this one for a little while now.
Yeah, I think
the
so. Right?
The martial arts one. So,
Right.
So I guess So the question for this one, at least on the psychedelic cathedrals, what's it like to practice martial arts? And there's lots of different lots of viewpoints out there.
Yeah.
So I guess how long have you? I know you've practiced different types of martial arts, right?
I have. Martial arts have been in my life since I was 12 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. Since I was 12, there's never been a time when I didn't have some kind of martial arts training going. Even if it was slow going. Like right now, I'm kind of at a lull because I ran out of training partners. But I've been actively recruiting, so I think it'll pick up here eventually. But when I was.
And what were you practicing last? You were doing jiu-jitsu, right?
The most recently I've been doing jiu-jitsu and KZ. Those two systems. So Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Gracie style Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and KZ. KZ's kind of a newer martial art. Comes out of Spain and Portugal area, and it's a martial art that's purposely designed for defense against multiple attackers, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's very different.
Yeah, because a lot of martial arts, I mean, once you get up to higher levels than that, you start doing techniques for multiple attackers, but usually it's sort of one-on-one type of stuff that you usually train for, right? Like even sparring and that. So that's cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So the KZ is very different. And actually, it was my first martial arts instructor that turned me on to it. The guy who taught me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from the time I was 12 to 18, the guy who taught me, who trained me at that time, a few years back, he got excited about KZ. At that time, it was called KFM. KZ fighting method. And
I've heard that.
And there was two guys that kind of collaborated in its design, and then they got really famous because they consulted on a few really hit action movies. They were the martial arts consultants on these, like the latest Batman movies. From that first one of the new series, with what's his name is playing Batman, but they like the Heath Ledger one was they did that and all that stuff, and they've been working on those Tom Cruise movies too. I forget what they're called.
Oh, okay.
The
like the Reacher movies.
Yeah, Jack Reacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they got really famous really quick, and it kind of was bad for their martial arts because they ended up going to bumping heads about money and this kind of thing, and they split, right? And when they split, the curriculum that they had built went off the market, and so the guy who was like my old instructor, he was like, well, I can't find it. I can't find their curriculum. I'd love to train this stuff, but I can't find their curriculum. And I kind of blew it off for a year, and then I got curious. I was like, what was that stuff you were looking into? I started looking into it, and I started finding some resources here and there, right? So I found about half maybe of the original KFM curriculum that's like recorded. They did a whole a series on video of their whole training, and so I found about half of those, and then I found a guy in Long Island who was willing to work with me and train me at a distance. So I had maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. Well, it was about 2 years ago because I was still at my Riverstone address before I moved to this place. We were meeting a couple times a week, and I had maybe 2-3 big guys, they would come and train with me a couple of times a week, and we'd just go at it, and we'd have this buddy from Long Island, Larry Serralo, who I ended up going to Long Island to do some training directly with him, and I put some of that on my YouTube channel and everything.
Okay. I think I saw a few. Well, yeah, that's a while back. It's probably a year or two where I seen you. Yeah, on the blue mats, they're doing some guards and submissions and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that might be jiu-jitsu stuff.
Okay.
Because if it was ground grappling, yeah, that was jiu-jitsu stuff.
Okay.
The Casey stuff is really different. Casey operates out of a lot of it when you're at close enough range. You're operating out of this position they call it pensador, which is basically like a fetal, curl up, right?
Yeah.
But they teach you how to strike from this position and defend from this position, and it's your best bet. It's your best bet to get hit the least, and it's a natural position for you to take if you're getting beat up by multiple people. But if you're able to actually strike out of this position and do some damage and stuff, that really helps. It's better than just curling up to die. Right? So it's a really kind of a unique system. And now they've split up. One of the partners has gone on and created a system called Defense Lab. The T-shirt I'm wearing. The other one has gone on to create KZ World, and they're both getting a little bit too elaborate. They seem to be kind of losing their grounding in fundamental street realism.
Oh, okay.
And they're coming up with things that are too complicated.
Yeah.
And I've tested them out. One of my favorite training buddies, unfortunately, he joined the RCMP and they stuck him up in Red Deer, so I don't see him very much anymore. But when he comes around, I've always got a bunch of stuff for him and me to test, to field test. All right, this is what they're putting out there. Let's try some of this, and we try it. We try to find the holes in it, right? We test it to see if it actually works, right?
What was the name of that? What's that show on Discovery where they? Mythbusters. You're like the Mythbusters for martial arts.
Martial arts has a lot of bullshit in it. No matter which martial art, if it's a style, it's got a lot of bullshit mixed into it, and you really got to leaf through the style, and really do a Bruce Lee and pull out the stuff that actually works, and discard the stuff that's bullshit, because there's a lot of bullshit. It's probably 90% bullshit and 10% stuff that works. And the stuff that works is usually the basics, right? It's usually the fundamental stuff. And then it gets way too elaborate, and it fails to actually function when somebody's coming at you, and they're actually trying to do you harm, right? It's different than if you're in a dojo and everybody knows what you're doing. It's kind of those are kind of choreographed a lot of times, right? And even though it feels like it would work, if you actually tell the guy really go after me and try to hurt me, it's not going to work. Okay, all the complicated techniques and stuff. So I was very fortunate, I think, in my training that my formative years from 12 to 18. Were spent with an actual fighter, with a guy who was a kickboxer, who was award-winning kickboxer, had black belts in Kempo and Taekwondo, so he had a couple legitimate, black belts, but he was already onto the let's get rid of the bullshit in these systems and just take the good stuff, right? Take the stuff that works. So. Even then, though, he that was training with him. It was a lot of medium to hard contact stuff, right? We sparred every night, and the sparring was pretty hard, And we did things we called street situations, where we would just go after people like maniacs, 2-3 on 1. To see what they could do, to see how they could defend themselves. And usually they wouldn't be able to defend themselves, usually,
right.
But it was, how long can you make it, right?
Didn't
have a chance at all. And then,
so what? I guess just going back for a second, Ryan. Like, what got you going with? Like, what made you want to start practicing to begin with? Like, was there something in particular that set it off, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was just the 1980s, and there was martial arts were in the public eye.
Right. Yeah. Karate Kid.
Yeah, Karate Kid. Chuck Norris movies were still coming out. The ninja stuff.
Yeah.
Like, there was all these ninja movies that passed through, and yeah, martial arts was a big deal in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody did something, I think, right? so
true, the 70s, right? Like Bruce Lee, and that was started it off in the late 60s, early 70s. Yeah.
So I happened to be I had some kung fu training when I was very young, like 6, 7, 8 years old. And
okay.
In a kind of formal kung fu school, and then I left martial arts alone. But one day I was walking down my street, and way down at the other end of my street, this guy was training in his garage. He had his garage door open. He had a heavy bag, and he had his walls were lined with weapons and stuff.
Yeah.
And when I seen him training in there, I just approached him and I said, can you teach me? And he was like, yeah, for sure. When we started talking, and we ended up coming to a deal where I'd come to his place twice a week, and he'd train me. And he didn't charge much. I think he'd charge me like $25 a month or something. Just a little something, right? But
a real Karate Kid deal you had going there.
So. Yeah. And then I tried to recruit, my friends and stuff into it, but none of them could really hack it, because the first time they got kicked in the face or something, they're like, "No, I'm done," right? But I loved it. I don't know. I'm a little bit masochistic, I think. So I kind of enjoy a little bit of the pain and stuff, and I enjoy the feeling that I'm training in something that I know to some extent it works, right? So and you can't get that without the hard sparring. Like when I left for the military at 18, then I started experimenting with other martial arts, and I quickly found that most of the traditional style martial arts out there, those schools, they're not really training their guys to be able to fight. They've got different theories they're working on. So I tried Taekwondo.
It's philosophy. It's the different. We'll talk about that too. Sure.
Yeah, to some extent. Like I did Taekwondo at a very famous school, the J.J. Kim's or J.H. Kim in Boston. I did a couple of years.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's the same school that Joe Rogan was.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, it sounds like the same place Joe Rogan went to.
Yeah, it was. It was the same. It was the same. He might have even been there the same time I was. I wouldn't know. It was a big school. There's a lot of people. And
what year was it?
This was, let's see, probably 1993, 94.
Oh, okay. I think he was in the mid-late 80s when he was there. So, yeah.
Yes, I trained there for a couple of years. I trained for a couple of years at Shubo Aikido at Boston.
Okay.
So I tried Aikido. And then when I moved here, of course I tried Gohakukai for several, like I did it for a couple of years and then took a break and then came back and did a little bit more. Then, decided it just wasn't working for me because I'm much more exhibitionist than is going to work for that school. I love Sensei Taka Kinjo, but and he does really good things for people. But I did, there were parts of that school that drove me a little bit nuts.
Yeah.
Like seeing people get black belts that, as a white belt I could know I completely confident I could beat up.
Probably like me, right, Ryan? Yeah. Dear.
Just like I don't know. It just wasn't like it's really good for as a kind of a healing art,
right?
To fix your body and make you move correctly. But as a martial art, I think Taka Kinjo trained very differently than how he's training. Because I seen him be challenged. When we were training there was a day, an afternoon where there was a mixed martial artist, a young guy that came in and was watching and started calling down what was happening, and Taka says, well, you want to try it, right? You want to spar me, right? And the guy tried to hurt him, and but it was nothing. Like Taka just has no problem. Every time the guy got within, every time the guy closed the gap, he get locked up, put right on the ground. A lot of times pretty hard, and then manipulated on the ground like he was completely out of control, right?
Yeah.
So I know what Taka himself is capable of with with the karate, but I don't see his students being capable of any of that. Right?
Used to be so it used to be different. Like I started with him. So I started karate. I've only ever practiced karate. I started karate in 1987. I started in Wado Kai style in Edmonton. It's actually a really big style in Edmonton, and it's more like it is more tournament based. It's more the sparring tournament based style of martial art. Moved to Lethbridge at the time. There was later on, but at the time there was no Wado Kai school in Lethbridge, and my mom had heard about Sensei Ginjo from just sort of word of mouth. Like he was pretty well known in Lethbridge, and this is 1990, and going into the dojo at that point, like it was. I mean, a lot of the basics were the same. Like, you do the punches, the blocks, the kicks. You do the katas.
Right.
But at one point, he was a lot more focused on the technique end of things, and he was a lot more focused. Like, he used to do full-size tournaments. Like, in the 90s, he did full sparring tournaments, full kata tournaments, like, all that sort of stuff. He used to do it all the time. And then, like, I left the dojo in 97, and came back in 2010. And, like, it was a very different school when I got back, because there was hardly really any sparring, in the dojo. And I think, so it's pretty clear that, and there was no tournaments. Like, don't even mention tournaments, because it's not. That wasn't part of the deal anymore. So even the way that he trained his students, and from what I'm told, I mean, I wasn't there. Like, he started teaching in the 70s,
right.
And if you trained with him in the 70s and the early 80s, it was very, very different again from what it was in the early 1990s. Like, he was much more like, I guess at one point street fighting was a really big thing in Lethbridge,
right?
Like in the 70s and early 80s, probably because of the same sort of stuff, like ninja movies and all that sort of stuff, right? There was a lot of street fighting, and I think at one point he was a lot more, like, he was training people a lot more to use karate as a combat, with the actual techniques. And then slowly over time that started to change. Like Robbie, right? I mean, Robbie Ross, who's a senior student, I think kind of came in at the tail end of that.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of that era where, because I can remember Robbie having, he was pretty, he had some pretty good game. He was, he still does, but he had some pretty good in terms of sparring and technique and that sort of thing. And he does pass it on a little bit still. I know that sometimes him and James Nakashima, they practice a little bit and do some of the things that nobody else really does.
Right.
They've also spent time in Japan at the head school, which again I think is a little bit different training again. So, but yeah, I mean, in terms of what you're saying, in terms of, and I mean, maybe this is a good time to start talking about this too. So when I started karate, it wasn't actually like I wasn't really influenced by like the sort of the movies and that were going on in the 80s. It was just something my mom was like, "Here, why don't you try this?" And so I'm like, "Yeah, okay, sure, why not?" You know, and just it became something that was, you know, it was part of my life. And I guess I mean, my philosophy of it is, yeah, I mean, obviously a martial art at its root is about combat tactics and that. But a lot of people, like especially in the traditional schools, like you're saying, they don't teach a lot of those combat tactics anymore. Like it's in the, I mean, they do in terms of basics, like how to punch, how to kick, how to block, you know, and if you get into the techniques of kata and that. But for a lot of people, it's become, I guess for some people, I mean, it's like with sensei, you know, to get them sort of back up and running when they've maybe been sick, or, you know, if they have they have something, they have an illness. And I think we talked about that before in another podcast. A lot of people too, it's, you know, it's become almost, in some ways it's kind of like yoga. I kind of compare it to yoga, because the yoga that you see in North America is not like traditional yoga is way harder, right? Like, and it's, you know, it's different, right? I mean, it's been adapted to fill a particular niche within the North American market. So, you know, so for martial arts, at least karate anyway, and the style of practice that Sensei Kinjo teaches is a lot more about the personal development piece through the physical, and then moving through the mental, and then, you know, for some people it's also a spiritual exercise.
Right.
Like it's kind of, for them, it's kind of like going to church on Sundays, right? Whether or not they actually want to, you know, fight anybody and, you know, go into a tournament, or even for self-defense. Like a lot of people that go aren't necessarily even looking at self-defense as a self-defense class beyond sort of the basics. So, you know, so yeah, it's, I think he'd be the first to tell you that, you know, there's different people come to martial arts for different reasons, right? I mean, the mixed martial arts, my impression of the mixed martial arts is that it's in a sense, it's an evolution of that combat aspect of it, where, you know, like what you were saying before, where a lot of the stuff that's kind of been built onto it, like even some of the katas, you talk to Sensei about some of the katas that you learn. Yeah. And, you know, like the move, one of the Tomorite katas, one of the high Kusan-ku, I think, where you're like slapping your legs or something like that, and everybody's, you know, Sensei, what is that? And he says, it's not really anything. It's just kind of a style thing. It's what I would call a here's my dick move, right? Yeah. So yeah, a little bit. Yeah, of flair. Yeah. So yeah, I know what you're saying in terms of the. There being a lot of stuff that's added on, and I think that's happened over time, and it's happened. Like karate was at one point. I mean, it was what it is now and what it was 200 years ago was entirely different. I mean, the conditioning even that goes into like they obviously didn't have heavy bags or anything. These rocks. Yeah. I love all that stuff. I totally dig all that really like primitive conditioning. The whole Masayama stuff. That's awesome. That's some killer conditioning. I love that stuff. Eh? Yeah. Well, it's like, what is it? Every village in Okinawa, I think, had a boulder in the center of it, and just when people went by, they'd do like 10 chops on it to do some conditioning, where it condenses the bone dense, like the bones, I guess, your bone density increases, so it's actually a harder strike. That's what that Makiwari boards.
Yeah.
That's what they're for, I guess. So
right. Yeah, it does work. Like,
Yeah.
I was when I was training with Sensei, I could hit a brick wall like pretty hard, Yeah. And my hand is fine, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it that kind of conditioning and training and everything works. I think the mixed martial arts, like what has gone on, like, I don't train martial arts to be a fighter.
Right.
I'm not a fighter, like even by nature, but I'm just too old at this point anyway. But even if I was 19, I wouldn't be trained to be a fighter because it's not me, right?
Yeah.
But I do want to train something that's functional, right? That works,
right?
For self-defense and for fighting, and like for me in my lifetime, and this is why I had to switch over to doing jiu-jitsu and stuff too. I think the last time I was training with Sensei Kinjo, I was also cross-training at the same time with this guy from Chicago who's kind of a YouTube sensation guy. Yeah, Freddie Lee, and he's kind of he's got his own thing going on. Hey, he's a little bit crazy, and but I thought he's good, the good crazy though, He really worships Bruce Lee and very, very into his coming up with his own stuff, right? Like really exploring it as an art, not as a tradition, but as as an emerging art. But he had boundaries where, like, he didn't like the ground grappling. And he was adamantly against the UFC and what they were doing in sports fighting. Mm-hmm. But when I look at the UFC and I look at what has gone on since about 1990, the martial arts has like really transformed, like wickedly transformed from what I knew as a kid. Like, I don't know how traditional schools even still exist today, because they've been proven to be so ineffective, those styles, when compared to people who have cross-trained in just mixed martial arts and don't have the limitations of style. I hold fighters in really high regard because I figure they're the ones sacrificing so that we get some real knowledge about what works and what doesn't work. And, and so I see what's going on, in the octagon. There's limitations there too. You don't have like eye gouges. When you get an accidental one, you see how much damage an eye gouge can do, and that's just an accidental poke, But if you're going at it, eye gouge can be just absolutely crippling. Based on what you see happen in the cage with accidents and that kind of thing. So there are limitations, like there's things you're not allowed to do in the cage. And I know that's some of the stuff that some of the traditional styles, they'll be like, well, that's not real either, because, what they're doing, if I can't eye gouge or whatever, I can't soccer kick you when your hands are on the mat or whatever, then you're putting limitations on. That's true, but they at least push it as far as they can go and stay relatively safe for people.
Yeah.
And it's a really good testing grounds that has definitely shown where things are working and where they're not, and we've seen massive evolution in the martial arts as a result, I think. Like even from the earlier UFCs to what they are now. Those guys that were the best in the earlier UFCs would just be destroyed by the guys now.
Yeah. It's like hockey, right? Same sort of thing. Wayne Gretzky even said that about hockey. He says, there's no way I would have made it in the NHL today, right? Just because of the evolution of the sport.
Yeah, it's just so evolved. So, I'm, for myself, I'm having fun trying to even keep up a little bit with the changes in martial arts, right?
Right. Yeah.
And the reality is that everybody's watching this stuff on TV now, and
Yeah.
even watching it, you can gain some skills. Like even just watching it, you can gain some skills. So that if you're fighting on a street now, you might have some really high-end and deadly techniques waged against you by guys who never trained nothing, but they've seen it.
Yeah.
You know, everybody knows what a
true.
rear naked choke does now, right? And so, you know, you got to face that stuff now if you get attacked. So you better know how to defend against it, right? So, so yeah, I have fun with that, trying to kind of, you know, trying to keep up, and you know, I do martial arts because for the fitness aspect as well. But I could just do fitness if that's all it was, right?
Sure.
Why bother with the martial arts if all I'm interested in is fitness? So I do martial arts because I want to learn something that's functional as well as getting me healthy at the same time, right? So
yeah. Well, even myself with practicing, like I've you know, I don't have anybody up here to practice with, like for sparring and that sort of thing. But in the house here, I've the basics, like the basic like punches and that are the sort of things that I'm trying to keep up.
Right.
And you know, some of the techniques, like I'll practice some of the specific techniques that I know have a function in the katas, because like some of it's not, right. I mean, some of it is simply stylistic. Right. But yeah, there's some aspects that would be, are basic, like they're simple, like you were saying before. They're not overly elaborate. They're just basic, you know, defense and attack techniques that come in the katas. So, you know, trying to practice some of those as well. Yeah, I was going to ask you. So, a lot of people that look at martial arts, they want to know, sort of have a sense of what it's like when you start off. So what would you say, you know, what's it like to start off in a martial art if you've never done it before? And what sort of things, I guess, should you be conscious of, you know, in terms of your practice,
right?
from your experience?
Yeah, it's good questions. I think most people when they start off in the martial arts, it's different than what they expect. I think they're expecting kind of a rapid mastery or rapid gaining of skills that is not possible, right?
Right.
I know, like some, you know, you'll see a lot of guys. The turnover rate is huge.